As we've gone through these last few weeks, as we've gone through this series, I pray that God has spoken to you. I pray that God has helped you better understand not only this process, but your relationship with Him. That we are to live lives while also helping to win over some things in our different lives. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I struggled this week. I struggled with this particular part of this series. It was a struggle for me. And part of it is because now we're on the third base. We're trying to figure out how to win that third base. We talked about winning home base, which was God's power, God's purpose. We talked about winning first base, which was character. Winning within. And then we talked about last week about winning second base, which was winning with others. And so this week, we're talking about third base, and that is where we're talking about winning results. Now, here's one of the reasons why I struggled with this. And like I said, and I'm going to let you know, I struggled with this personally. So as you hear me go through these things, just like most weeks, this is just as much for me as it is for each and every one of you. God spoke to me this week. And I needed to be reminded of a few things this week. Because like I said, we've talked about character, we've talked about relationships, we've talked about dependence on God. But now it's time to third base. And you think about it, third base is where we're within grasp. Home base is right there. You see it within your grasp. The problem that we run into, and the problem that I ran into as I was going through this, is third base can look very drastically different for each and every one of us. You see, up to now, we all have relationships. We all have character. Some of us, I don't want to say we all have character, whether it's good or bad, we all have character. And I pray that we all have a relationship with God. But, since third base is that performance base, how do we apply a principle that makes sense for a young person who maybe hasn't started a career and started working, they haven't had the expectations of performance put on them, or a stay-at-home mom, or in this day and age, a stay-at-home dad, someone already in the midst of a career, maybe somebody that's already lived through their entire career and now is getting to experience the reward of retirement. We can have from one spectrum to the other. And you see, but here's the thing, some of us struggle with where our life finds its purpose. Because we're all going to fall underneath one of those categories. So I'm hoping to present this third base in a way that makes sense to each and every one of you. But I pray that you each hear what the Spirit has for you and sees how you can apply these understandings in your own life. That you see the principle and that you're able to make it personal. Because as I said, we've all struggled in our life where our life finds its purpose. At some point we said, well, my work is my purpose and where I find my worth and my identity. Maybe we're just getting started, maybe we're in the midst of it, maybe we're already finished up and we struggle with that, and that's where we still see our identity at, is in that career, that life that we've lived, because you think about how many hours do you spend in a job? How many hours a week? How many hours of your life? We spend the majority of our life performing. That's where we spend the majority of our life at. So it's very easy for us to be able to fall into this thing going, this is where either I find my purpose, or I find my worth, or my identity. Well, what is my work? And as I said, we've all got different types of things that you could say is what your work is. Some of us, it's maybe a 40-hour work week job that you work. Maybe for some of us, like I said, it was raising kids. Maybe for some of us, it's teaching a Sunday school class, or cleaning a church, or helping out in children's ministries or youth ministries, or whatever it is within church, just ministry as a whole. There's different forms that we can look at and say, that's what my work is in my life. That's what I do. You see, we get all wrapped up in it, and it becomes the consuming part of our lives. And even ministry can be a consuming part of our life. And like I said, as I went through this week and as I was preparing for this, because I'm in one of those unique positions where I'm looking at this going, ministry is my work to a certain degree. Mine kind of blends over into a couple of different areas. But I was also looking at this going, looking at our church as a whole, and I'm going, most of us as a whole can definitely relate to this in ministry in some form or fashion. So I'm going to try to make sure that this falls into the realm, and I'm trying to focus this more toward ministry. Because ministry is work. Performance. Because I told you guys when we first started this, that these principles that we apply can be applied to us personally, but it can also be applied to us as a church.
Yes.
And so it's important for us to understand and see these principles. And so this morning, like I said, I want to really pray that we open ourselves up and we see this as something that we can apply to us as a church, in ministry, or at a career if we have a career or still are in a career. Because we can get wrapped up even in ministry. And it can become even a consuming part of our lives. And now hear me out here. I'm not here to tell you that work is bad. But how we approach and see our work in our lives is important.
Yes. We
don't have to sacrifice work for the sake of family, and family for the sake of work. This is what this whole thing is about, is it's winning those bases. It's not saying that we can't have that performance base. If we weren't allowed to have that, it wouldn't even be in the running. So God is telling us that we can have those things. It's okay to work. It's okay, but family is important and work is important. It's all those different things are important. What he's trying to teach us is that it's how we approach those things. It's the order that we put them in. It's how we see them that matters. God invites us into an eternity with Him, the joy of it all. You see, you can grow character, you can win with family, and you can have this measure of success, and we can bring it all to God's glory. Because that's part of what we're doing. We so easily get stuck into this trap of going, this is my performance, this is my show, this is my award I won. And I just wanted to remind you, the verse that we've been using week after week that falls underneath this is Romans chapter 12, verses 1 through 2. And again it says, and so, dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God because of all He has done for you. Let them be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind He will find acceptable. This is truly the way to worship Him. Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. See, we're all working on these four things. As we've sat here and talked about these four basics, we're all working on them. They're all something that's in our lives. All of us. The believer, the unbeliever, the agnostic, the atheist, the follower of Christ, it doesn't matter. Remember, we sat here and said the world runs these bases. They just run them in the wrong order. So this applies to everybody. We're all working on these things. And we all have to win the same four things. And like I said earlier, what matters is the order. Connecting with God. Developing the character that we need. Developing the community. And then the competence. The performance. I love this. I read this analogy. And actually one of the individual that came up with this home run, this home base analogy He goes, the difference in how we run the bases gives us one of two outcomes, a steak or a cow patty. They're both from the same thing, a cow.
Okay.
Just depends on how you run them.
Yeah.
If you make a career or competency your life purpose, you're going to end up with a cow patty kind of life. If we make our Creator your purpose, your foundation, and you get it right, you're going to get the steak kind of life. You see, they're the same thing, but it depends on what order you put them in. There's something breaking down in our world. In the Christian community, Christians don't live any better quality of life than non-Christians. There are as many divorces, broken marriages, families, and circumstances. They fall in character as often, just as often, they mismanage their money just like the rest of the world. We all struggle with these things. There's something, so like I said, there's something that's breaking down. They don't have any more peace than the rest. And to me, I hate to read that. I hate to read and sit there and think about that believers don't find any more rest than non-believers. And I'm going, I don't know about them, but I'm looking at it going, something's not right. Because I can't imagine running my life without my Savior. I can't imagine not having the rest that I have found in Christ throughout the years. And if they don't find any more rest, I think there's something that might be broken. The thing is, we're messed up, broken, and unresolved. They don't have any better quality of life. If that's true, we think we might know why. While we say we follow Christ, we still live by the pattern of the world. In fact, many of us who become Christians do nothing more than add God and ask Him to bless a backward, base-running life. Basically, we're taking a cow patty, we're wrapping it up in Christmas paper, it may be more presentable, but let's face it, it's still a cow patty.
Yeah. Sure is. Yeah.
If you have bad thinking, you're going to have not a happy life. I used to have a pastor years ago, and one of his thing was stinking thinking. So he'd always be like, there's just times when the world, you start doing things, you just get stinking thinking. And he was just, bad attitude, places weren't, your life just wasn't where it was supposed to be at. And he would say, you could see how it would domino effect throughout his life. And that he needed those people in his life to basically come up to him and say, man, you got some serious stinking thinking going on right now. See, you can pray all you want to, but God's not going to bless that cow patty. We're not transformed. We're just trying to get God to bless the way the world does stuff. It's the easier way of doing it. What we're trying to do is, instead of us changing, we're trying to get God to bend and change around us.
Yeah.
But we're not the ones being transformed. We can't put our purpose in our careers or our competencies. So here's a curveball for you. What do you say to someone who is seeing this from a ministry focus? Is it bad to put my purpose in ministry as a minister? Or as a Sunday school teacher, teaching a Sunday school class? Or a youth worker that's working as a youth worker? Pick any ministry position you can. A missionary, pick any one of them as you can. I think we can. I think when we get things out of whack, we get them out of order. And when that happens, God does not bless our ministry, and we can become burned out and unproductive. We see it happen within ministers all the time. Ministers that get burned out that quit ministry. They don't have the productive ministries like they can. But I want to take this beyond even just the minister himself. Look at the church. The church has a ministry. What about the church as a whole? Can the church find its purpose in the wrong things? To the point where God's not going to bless its ministry, and we can become burned out and unproductive. Our life purpose is in our Creator. We work for Him. He becomes our provider. God is my primary provider. How many of us understand the pressures of performing? Most of us can all understand and relate to the expectations of performing. If we've ever been assigned any type of job, duty, job responsibilities, we can understand the pressures of performing. People are looking at us and they're expecting us to do this job. And there's pressure that comes with that. In Matthew 6:25, it says, "This is why I tell you not to worry about everyday life, whether you have enough food and drink or enough clothes to wear. Isn't life more than food and your body more than clothing?" You see, in this passage, Jesus is trying to get us to see the bigger picture. If we follow these bases in the right order, so that by the time we get to third base, God is already intimately involved in everything. So you see, we're all worried about finances, business, careers, ministry. And again, even within the church, we can get so worried about those things even within the church. We can be focused on, are we bringing enough money? Or is tithe up where it needs to be at? Do we have enough volunteers to be able to do the things that we need to do? We get so focused on the business and the administration of things that we start to get things a little bit out of focus. We start to look at the performance as the beginning and not the end. You see, and this whole thing, it's more than about money. It's about results. It just happens to be in like a job that you work, the results of you working a career, most of the time is money. More money you make. I mean, it can be more than money. Sometimes it can be the prestige or, how people perceive you, the feeling of importance that you get. But the facts are, is there's some type of result for everything. And it's about whether God is the one providing the results. You see, number one thing is that we have to remember is God is my provider. I trust in Him. We have to practice this. We have to practice saying, God is my provider, I trust in Him. Psalms 20, verses 6 through 8 say, "Now I know that the Lord rescues His anointed king. He will answer him from His holy heaven and rescue him by His great powers. Some nations boast of their chariots and horses, but we boast in the name of the Lord our God. Those nations will fall down and collapse, but we will rise up and stand firm."
Amen. Yes.
He's saying, I understand that I have all kinds of providing pressure here on third base. That's what he's saying. People trust in material things, and in matter, power, we trust in the name of the Lord our God. We understand that if you get that you get home plate foundational right, and God becomes involved in the third base success. You think about where we mess up a lot of the times on third base. What we're talking about, this whole thing about trusting God, it comes back to that home base issue. It all links back to that. If we're not trusting Him, we're not relying on His purpose and His power. And that was, remember, that was home base, His purpose and His power. We're not relying on that. And we're struggling trusting Him. We're that He's going to provide for us. If we're struggling, as I've said before, if we're struggling at any one of these particular bases, you can look at the ones that preceded it and be able to see which one it was. Was it home base, first base, second base? Which one was it? Where are you at? Learn how to practically live out the fact that God is intimately involved in your business and your career and your finances and your ministry, whatever it is. It's not separate. It's all one thing. Some things to practice in order to implement the I trust the Lord. First thing is before I run the work, I walk with God. Before I run the work, I walk with God. He is my first provider, my highest purpose. I'll talk to God about the day and what's coming. I talk to God about my work worries and my work pressures. We got to have that relationship with Him. How many of us struggle with that? How many of us wake up and the first thing we do is we talk to God? And then throughout the day, we feel these pressures just coming in and around us. Did we start off talking with the Lord that morning? I don't know. I ask God every day for wisdom and success in the work I do. I don't do my work on my own. I bring to God whatever would bring worry in my life, and I hand it off to Him. And I'm going to tell you, sometimes I'm successful with that, sometimes I'm not. And my wife will be the very first person that will testify to that. A little bit of a moment of honesty. Even pastors, we struggle with that. There's days that I come home and I feel these burdens and these pressures just weighing down on me. And this is one of those things that I always say, behind every great pastor is a great pastor's wife. And I'm one of those people, I believe the better the pastor, the better the wife. My wife will look at me, first thing off, she will look at me and she'll go, she's one, she puts it right in your face, she throws it right back at me.
Yep, good.
She'll be like, are you trusting God? Are you giving it to God?
Yep.
Are you allowing the enemy to win? Because I even have those days from time to time where I struggle with that. And I may start off the day in prayer and talking with God, but things happen throughout the day, and I need a little bit of a refresher throughout the day. Maybe I needed to end the day the same way I started the day. Secondly, that we work up to 6 days, but not 7. The world today may work 7, but this is not an act of faith. And again, this is a big one even for ministers. We're on call all the time. And it can be very easy, and even when I'm not working, my mind's going a million miles an hour with different things. And I have to know that I have to take that time and say, I'm going to shut it off. That I'm going to be where I'm at in that moment. And I'm not going to, so even though I'm not physically working, is my mind still working? Is my heart where it needs to be at? Am I allowing those aspects of myself to have that day off? In fact, one person said, every day when I wake up, I say, thank you, God, for this day off. I'm not going to solve any more problems. I'm done for 24 hours. It's not all on me. My act of faith is, I quit working. That's a big one right there. Now, again, that's not for, someone saying, well, my act of faith is I'm going to quit my job. No. My act of faith is for that one day, things are going to continue on without me. See, we need to be convinced that we can do more in 6 days than we can in 7 days of work. So we have to cease striving to know that He is God, where I start feeling like God myself and it undoes my life. So we have to know that He is Lord of our lives. Because like I said, very quickly, as we start to talk about performance, we start to very quickly begin to think about, hey, we are God. This is all me. This is all my reward. This is all because of what I've done. So we have to know that He is God. He is Lord. Thirdly, we have to put limits on our work week. Focused, engaged, intense, undistracted, invested work. A whole lot of people show up, but they don't actually work. A whole lot of people are present, but are not emotionally, mentally, and fully present. What we're saying here is when it's time to work, work. Devote yourself 100% to it. Not halfway doing the job, halfway doing it. Now, I do believe this also falls back a little bit on the character thing. If we're struggling in this area, a lot of times we hear in the world, hey, you got strong character. You got great work ethic. We relate those things. See, a lot of people can spend an hour but not invest an hour. A set hours of work where you actually make a difference. You see, the majority of people can't work focused and intense because they're in the drama and distraction of their lives that are broken and don't work. I can sit there and think about back in my life, the times I had the hardest time struggling at work was when I had drama going on in the rest of my life. It just I wasn't able to think. I wasn't allowed to focus like I needed to. I don't know. Maybe not everybody's that way. But I knew that I struggled harder when there's all that type of stuff going on than when I could just devote 100%.
Sure.
Whatever in your life is broken, you carry it with you, and everywhere you go, this causes inefficiency in work and liabilities. I can go to work fully focused because if I do life by God's design, I can build strength into it and I'm not distracted. When I put in an hour, I can get a real hour's worth. God has built life so that the longer you live and the longer you work and the better you build, the more freed up you are. Third base gets bigger over time. The second thing is, God is my provider. I work for Him. Colossians chapter 3, verse 22 says, "Slaves, do not obey your earthly masters in everything you do. Try to please them all the time, not just when they are watching you. Serve them sincerely because of your reverent fear of the Lord. Work willingly in whatever you do, as though you were working for the Lord rather than for people. Remember that the Lord will give you an inheritance as your reward, and that the master you are serving is Christ. But if you do what is wrong, you will be paid back for the wrong you have done, for God has no favorites." Some have said, "Oh, I do life by God's design. I do the bases around the diamond. Because of that, I'm less on third base. By following God, my third base career is smaller than it would be." I knew an individual, I worked for an individual that was that way. Multiple different people throughout the years. I knew people that were that way and worked for him. I had one, his character was not good. He would cheat and swindle someone faster than anything. And so he thought that, hey, if you're to tell him that you need to follow these bases, he's going to see this as making his third base smaller. In fact, at one point, I went head-to-head with this man in business and competition. And I had more people leaving him and coming over to me. And it wasn't because of the quality of work, because he did great quality work. It wasn't about the price, because they were willing to pay me the same thing that they paid him. It was because of the character of the individual. They were like, "I don't trust him." They said, "I don't like the way he runs his mouth about things." They said, that's exactly what he was doing. He's running his mouth about me. Trying to one-up me. Trying to build his third base bigger. But all he did was force more people my way when that happened. So he was one of them that would very quickly you'd be able to sit there and say, "Well, you can't follow these things because your third base is going to be smaller." But I'm here to tell you, if you follow these things, that's not the case. You see, being a follower of Christ does not cover up shoddy or bad work. You can't do bad work and then ask God to bless it. When nobody is looking, what you do still counts. Many of us aren't where we want to be at in third base. Where the truth is, we're walking when we should have been running. We've done shoddy work and we did it to ourselves. I remember moments in my life where I had that opportunity. And I was in printing. I was the one that did all the design work, set everything up, and then I was also the one that usually had to print all of it as well. And we were doing this big job, and it was this we had hand cut out these invitations. So we were sitting back there, and I designed everything, the customer proofed it, I printed it, and then the owner stood back there, and he was hand cutting these things out by hand, and hand scoring these things, and hand folding these invitations together. And it was on a Friday, I think it may have been like a Labor Day weekend, it was on a Friday, and I sat there, and I looked at it, and I went, just happened to walk by as I was leaving the office, and I looked down and saw the biggest typo in the world on this invitation. So I'm faced with this dilemma. What do I do with it? Do I just let it slide? Because the customer did sign off on it. Here's the proof. I've got the sheet right here where they signed off on it. Do I ignore it? Or what do I do? Do I just try covering it up? What happens? So I made the decision. I thought, I can't do that. So I took the time and I thought, last thing I'm also doing is, it's not this person that was cutting them out, it wasn't their responsibility to fix my mistake. So I took my Labor Day weekend and I went up and I reprinted the job and I stood back there and recut these things out myself. The owner comes in on Tuesday and he goes, what happened back there? Because he still saw the old one sitting over here off to the side. And I told him what happened, and he looked at me and he goes, you didn't have to do that. He could have helped you. And I said, yeah, but I did. I knew. I said, it was my mistake, my error. I needed to fix it. But I was faced with that dilemma. Do I fess up and own up to what I did that was wrong? Or do I just try to let it be shoddy and just kind of pass through the door? But it was those types of things that built the character, that built those things. I was relying back on that first base. Didn't even realize it at the time how I was relying back to that first base. See, the third thing is God is my provider. I wait for favor. In Joshua chapter 23 it says, for the Lord has driven out great and powerful nations for you, and no one has ever yet been able to defeat you. Each one of you will put to flight 1,000 of the enemy, for the Lord your God fights for you, just as he promised. So be very careful to love the Lord your God. See, we're getting tremendous success on third base, and one warrior takes down 1,000. We start to question, how is that possible? We start comparing our third base to somebody else's third base. And we can't do that. Favor is when God does for you what you cannot do for yourself. God grants favor in your career, in your finances. God does for you what you can never do for yourself. That temptation falls all the time, even within ministry. Again, this is a moment that I'm sharing with you guys about me. Pastors all the time, you see this church and this pastor over here, and this church is growing leaps and bounds. And you're sitting there, and it's one of those ones fighting 1,000. And you're sitting there going, man, why can't I do that? And we work harder and harder and try harder and harder ourselves. But the reality is, it was never us. It was him. So then let's even bring that down into a local level. We look at our church and we go, why is our church not being as effective as that church? We have to start evaluating and asking some of those questions. We can't start comparing ourselves and going, well, that church is winning, they're 1 to 1,000. But we can't even do maybe 10. But are we trying to do it on our strength? Because remember, God is our provider. We wait for his favor. You see, we have to be very careful to keep our home plate centered in the deep love for God. Because when you're right here and you walk by God's design, you free up God's favor. See, that's what we've been waiting for all along. That's how God designed life. It's just one of those things. Just like, the church can't save us. You can't earn your way back to God. That's why we have a little thing called grace. That's exactly the definition of grace. Is receiving something we don't deserve. There is no earning it. It is God's favor. See, we have to learn that the reason God makes it possible for us to become children of God is because we are not. We're God's creation. But think about this, at the very beginning, we're not His children. That's kind of a little bit of a hard grasp. We sit there and we think about all humans are children of God. But the facts are we are not adopted as a child of God until we have that moment where God comes into our life, cleanses us of our sins, and we become a believer in Him. That is when He adopts us as a child. We are all His creation, but we are only His children when we come into that covenantal, loving relationship with Him. See, there's a moment when we have to bow to Him and we receive. There's a moment where we have to quit being God in our life and confess that we're not God. We run into this, and I want to wrap up here and try to bring this back into a little bit of a home setting. I'm talking specifically as the church as a whole. And this isn't just our church, this is any church. Do we get so focused on performing and the pressures of performing that we miss out on God's purpose? It's about loving people. It's about reaching out to others. And it's not, and when we reach out to those individuals, it's not about upping our membership numbers or our tithing or whatever it is. It's about genuinely caring about those individuals. It's about loving those individuals as Christ loved those individuals. That's what God's purpose is for us to reflect His love and His heart in our lives. And when we don't do that, we can't expect to receive His favor, to receive His blessings in our life or the life of the church. We have to keep our eyes focused on the important thing, and that's God and what God wants for us to do. And it's when at those moments that we receive His blessing and His outpouring, and we receive those, being able to defeat one, being able to defeat 1,000. To be able to receive that outpouring of favor like none other. So my challenge is this morning for no matter where we're at in our lives, no matter where we're at in a career, no matter what it is, whether you're just beginning a career, you haven't started a career, you're in the midst of a career, or you've already done the actual career. But no matter what it is that you do in your life, again, whether it's ministry or it's just being a parent, I just want us to take a second, and Jesse and Lane, if you guys would come forward, I just want us to take a second and just for us to ask ourselves, have we allowed our purpose to get a little bit messed up? Have we allowed ourselves to find purpose in the wrong things? Are we trying to do things on our power? Because it all goes back to, if we aren't running, we don't have home base, first base, and second base, and have ran those in the right order, we can never hope to think about conquering third base. We've been building to this moment. Everything that we've been talking about, everything we've been doing, builds to this base, builds to this opportunity. Is it where it needs to be at? Is it focused on Him? Is it relying on Him? Is He our provider? Whether it be more people, more money, a better career, a bigger house. I don't care what it is. It doesn't matter. We all have things in our life that we expect results out of. So we all have the ministry of our life, but we are all first and foremost called to be Christians. And because being a Christian, it means that we follow these things. And so this morning, I just want you guys to just take a second and to sit there and think about, have I allowed my focus to get a little bit off? Am I relying on Him in every part of my life? Is He my sustainer? Is He my strength? Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we come before you this morning. And Lord, I pray that no matter where we're at in our lives, no matter what we're doing, no matter who we are, no matter what we do on a day-to-day basis, Lord, may we find the results in you. May we not allow the burdens and the pressures of those things to allow us to take our focus off of you, to allow us to start running those bases in the wrong order. That, Lord, that we may consistently look to you for our strength, Lord, for the outpouring, for the blessings, Lord, for your favor, Lord, and we don't deserve them. Whatever we do not deserve them. Just like, Lord, if we're not in a relationship with you, and we're looking for and we join into a relationship with you, Lord, we don't deserve that either. We don't deserve the outpouring and the blessings that you've bestowed on us, Lord. But that's what grace is. So, Lord, just be with us this morning as we leave this place, as we go out into the world, as we go out to do those things, as we go out to perform. May we find our purpose. May we find our worth in you, Lord. By staying focused on you, by relying on you, by allowing you to do, Lord, what you do best. And for us to be able to take ourselves off of the throne of our lives and to put you in place, Lord. Because it is only in those moments that we will seek, we will be able to receive that outpouring like none other, Lord. So, Lord, just be with us as we leave. Give us the strength, the focus that we need as we go out to this world, Lord. Lord, we love you. and in all things, may we honor and bless you. Amen.
Amen.
As you guys leave this week, I just have a little blessing to bestow upon you. May the love of Jesus Christ bring us wholeness. The grace of God the Father grant us peace. The breath of the Holy Spirit instill passion, and the unity between them give us strength for this and every day. Amen.
Same to you.